Okay, so welcome everybody. It's good to have you here. We're gathered together to practice some Yin Yoga today. And today we are doing what I call my torso flow. And so this particular sequence focuses on the muscles that are in the torso. And a very simple way of thinking of the torso is we basically have four planes. We have the front, the back, and the two sides. And so in today's class, it's our intention to stretch each of these a couple of times. So the sides will do, and then we'll repeat that. And the front will do a couple of times, the back will do a couple of times, okay? So we'll begin with our sides, and we begin with what's called a banana pose. So making your way onto your back, I'm gonna move these props out of the way for now, into what we call a pentacle position. And pentacle is just laying on your back, relaxing on your back, if you will. And what I recommend is you move your hips over to the right edge of your mat. Then, reaching up, you're grabbing the right wrist with your left hand, take your right ankle over your left, and then this is a key step. We want to actually pick our legs up and move them over. It's not enough just to cross the ankle. We actually want to move things over. And then same with the upper body. Most people will want to wiggle over as I'm doing now. And we wiggle over to the side, and what we want to feel is a stretch here. Now, the most common mistake, and when I say mistake in yoga, it means what you're doing is either unsafe or it is ineffective. It means one of those things. There's no like magic formula somewhere with a perfect body, and that's the right way to do the pose. When we're doing a pose wrong, it means that either we're going to hurt ourselves immediately, or maybe in the future if we keep doing it that way, or it means we just aren't getting much benefit from it. So the common mistake in this pose looks like this. Okay, now you might be laughing and think, why would anyone do that? Well, I don't know, but it happens in class all the time. So important, we keep the right hip on the ground, okay? We move the hips, or we move the legs over. The hips stay where they are. And same with the upper body. We move it over. The hips stay where they are. What we're doing, what we're trying to do, you can actually palpate if you want. You can feel on your body. Here's the rib cage. It's very rigid. Yes, there's some soft tissue inside the ribs and around the ribs, but for the most part, it's pretty darn hard. Okay, and then if we go down here in the pelvis, it's the same thing. There's lots of bone, lots of bony structure. It's a fairly solid structure. Now, if you go here, it's really, really soft, right? It's really squishy in here in the middle. It's the way our body was designed to be. So what we're trying to do is stretch this part in here, and to some degree between the ribs. So the further that my pelvis, the crest of my pelvis, which is right here, again, you can feel where yours is, and then the bottom set of ribs, the further I pull those apart, the more these muscles tend to stretch. So that's what we're trying to do with this posture today, banana pose. This does not do it. It just doesn't. Rolling onto your side, you're not going to get a stretch. You're just going to be laying on your side, okay? So that's called banana, once again, coming into that position. All right, so we stretch the muscles of the torso because we like to keep these muscles healthy. As we age, when we're really young, a lot of times we don't need as much maintenance to maintain our health. For one thing, young people very often are just more active anyway. But even if they aren't, from a yogic perspective, a young person has a lot of what the Taoists call qi and what the yogi calls prana. Now, sometimes when we use those terms, science folk or Western people start to roll their eyes and they start to think that, okay, here we go, now we're getting weird. But the truth is, it's not weird at all. And I'll give you a very good example. So as some of you know, recently my father passed away due to COVID. Now, as far as I'm concerned, my father is gone. His body is still around. We can probably go find it. I actually think he was cremated, but let's just say he wasn't. He was embalmed and his body is there. I would love it if my father were here in my house with me. I don't want his body in here, even if it's embalmed, even if it's, perfectly preserved and it doesn't smell or look funny. I don't want it in here. That's not my father. So whatever my father was has left his body. Okay, we all kind of intuitively know this. No one wants a corpse around. No one wants a dead body around. We all know that what is inside of me right now, animating me, is different than my body. Now, this becomes important because in the West, we have been on a quest for the last, I don't know, several hundred years at least, and maybe longer. Maybe the roots of this tendency have been around longer, where we've been trying to reduce everything to physical matter. We've been trying to sort of deny that there's anything but physical matter. And part of the reason we do this is because matter can be studied using the scientific method. And so in an effort to sort of make ourselves feel really like we know what's going on, we try and say there's nothing but matter and we can study matter. All right, let's switch sides. As you make your way over, maybe pause for a minute in the middle and see if you feel the stretch, a difference on the right side versus the left side, okay? Hopefully you feel that something has shifted or changed there. And then you can move your hips over to the left side. And same idea, you bring your left ankle over your right, you move the legs over to the right side of the mat, reach up, grab that left wrist with your right hand, and then you move your arms over shoulder, head, neck. Again, you need to be as aggressive as you need to be to feel the stretch. Now, the other part of it, and I think all of you have heard me say this at one point or another, the other part of that is it needs to feel safe. So if you come to a point where you feel the stretch, but for some reason, maybe there's a strong pain in your back, maybe there's a pinching in the right side as you stretch the left side. It could be any number of things, or maybe with your shoulder up overhead, you feel some nastiness in the shoulder. You're wondering, is that safe for me? That feels really intense. I'm not sure that that's right. Well, then we want to look at that. We want to examine that because it may not be safe for you. And pain is one way that our body might signal to us that what we're doing is not safe. Now, I think all of you heard me say that there is both good pain and bad pain. So we can't freak out or assume that everything that is uncomfortable is necessarily dangerous. But we do want to slow down and start to ask that question. Is this dangerous? Should I be doing this? Is there another way that I could be doing this? We want to start to ask those questions. So if that comes up, let me know and we'll take a look at it together, okay? All right, so again, if I feel the stretch here and I feel that this is within the range of what is safe for me, then again, I'm gonna call that correct, meaning it is effective and it is, at least to the best of our knowledge, safe for you. If either of those criteria are not met, it's either not effective or it's not safe, and we need to see if we can find another way for you to do this. All right? Otherwise, you just stay there. The power of yin practice comes from holding the postures, not from doing anything fancy, breathing in any particular way, meditating in any particular thing. Just, again, feeling that stretch there. So, back to what I was talking about a moment ago. For the yogi and the Taoist, the life force in the body, again, my father has left his body. What does that mean? The life force, whatever it was that was animating that body that has caused it to go into a state that we call dead, that life force, that was my father. and he has left his body. And so we all, again, we can think in the West, oh, well, I don't believe in chi and prana and all this. Well, I mean, do you want a corpse in your house or not? Because when something dies, what has happened? All the physical parts of my father were there the minute after he died. Okay, so when the doctor went and wrote down on his pad or whatever and said, okay, time of death, whatever it was, the minute before and the minute after, physically there was really nothing had really changed. All the same stuff was there. All the same stuff was there. What has really changed? Something very important had changed, right? And again, we, on a human level, we understand this. It's only when we get too wrapped up and we start thinking, approaching science like some kind of religion, that it kind of blinds us to the reality, which is a corpse is not a person. A person is not a corpse. If all a person was physical, then a corpse would be a person. All right? So I think we can all agree corpse is not a person. So whatever it is that's animating our bodies, animating our thoughts, animating our emotions, causing us to feel alive, this is what the Taoist calls chi, what the yogi calls prana. I'm oversimplifying things, but basically this is what's going on here. So in yoga practices, we are really trying to manipulate chi or prana, the life force in the body. Now, we can do that with manipulation physically, like postures. We can do that with breathing. It can be done on a more subtle level with meditative focus and awareness. So there are many techniques for doing this, but this is really what distinguishes the Eastern approach and perspective from more of a Western exercise approach. Exercise is very often just for your body. Again, it's you're manipulating your body, how you feel energetically, emotionally, not really important. It's just physical manipulation. But in the East, it's seen as part of a holistic understanding of the human being. Now, sometimes I don't say it in terms of East and West, because in the West, we also have a tradition of seeing things in this way. We just sort of lost it along the way. So if we go back far enough in the West, we find many of the same concepts are present in Western traditions. It's just more recently, again, as science has sort of gained in prominence. And again, I'm going to argue that it's really a misunderstanding of science and a, how might I put this, being too, making too many assumptions based on the limited information we have from science that makes people assume things like, oh, okay, there's no soul or there's no life force. Those things aren't real. All right, let's go ahead and unwind from that. We'll come back to neutral and let's rest for a moment. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. And we'll shake off that first posture, rocking back and forth, side to side, making circles with the knees, maybe kicking the legs a little bit. And what I want you to notice is any sense of imbalance, tightness, stiffness that you're feeling in your body. Try and use the movement as a way of bringing back a sense of balance or relief from what we did in that first posture. Then Slide your hands under your hips with the palms down. Extend your legs straight up toward the ceiling. Lift your head and neck up. If there's any pain in your back, I want you to bend your knees until that pain goes away. Otherwise, keep the legs straight up. Take a nice deep breath, and as you exhale, lower the legs toward the ground. And then just before they touch, pause, inhale, pop the legs up, and exhale, let the legs pull you up to a seat. Now we're going to focus on the back side of the torso. Again, we can think of the torso as 4 planes. We stretched the right side, then the left side. Now we want to stretch the back side. Now each side of the plane is different. That's one thing I want you to understand. So stretching one side, we don't necessarily stretch it in the same way that we do the other. So when we come into a forward fold, we want to generally be very gentle. We don't want to be aggressive in stretching our backside because that can create a lot of damage here. So very, very gentle. So this first stretch, we're going to join our feet together, push them out away from us because this is a groin or hip stretch. This is more of a torso stretch, okay? So feet out, and then we come forward and down, and we relax into this pose, which is called the butterfly pose, okay? Now, I'll talk a little bit about props for anyone who needs instruction in that regard, in that direction. So, a few ways that you can approach using the props here. One way is to help support you. So if this feels a little intense, there's a few ways that might happen, a few things that are common here. Of course, if anything is uncommon that's happening for you, let me know. Send me something in the chat or unmute and just let me know, and I'll be happy to help you with that. But these are things that are more common, so this might be something you're experiencing. One is the legs. So as I mentioned earlier, we aren't really interested in stretching the hips today. Torso is basically from the hips up and not including the arms or really the neck. So it's the trunk. We're focused on the trunk. So if my knees or my hips feel uncomfortable hanging out in the air, right? You can see my knees are not touching the ground. There's nothing inherently wrong or bad about that. But it's perfectly fine if this feels more comfortable, if this feels more safe, supporting my knee here, I absolutely should do so, okay? Now my legs are a little more supported. Okay, so that's one way to use the props. Another way is sometimes when we come forward, this can feel a bit intense, a forward fold, in which case I can use blocks like I'm using them now. I have 2 blocks under my forearms. And honestly, even though coming forward like this doesn't feel too intense for me, this does feel more comfortable. Just personally, for me, right now, it feels more comfortable. It feels a little easier. So this might be a great way for me to do the posture today. Another way would be maybe a block underneath the forehead. This also, again, even though I could do the pose like this without any support, having the block under my forehead feels better. It just feels, I don't know, not less intense, just maybe intense in a different way. Another way to support the body would be something under the torso like so. So I have a bolster here. I recognize that not everyone at home has the props. But if you practice yoga regularly, I do recommend grabbing, buying a set of props. Many yoga studios that I work at have been selling their props because they haven't been using them due to COVID. It's not really safe to share props. So they've just gotten rid of them. And some of them have even given away their props. So now is not a bad time to ask around. You might find that there's a set of props out there for you, maybe even free of charge. So resting the torso or supporting the torso with something like so can be a good way of adding some support. Now, almost any time I talk about support, I need to talk about the other side of the equation. Where there's a yin, there's a yang. And it's a very common mistake that especially yoga teachers make, where they confuse yin yoga and restorative yoga. And if we have too much support, we're no longer doing yin, we're starting to do restorative. And there's nothing wrong with restorative, it's just not yin yoga, right? One way of thinking about this, if you're a little confused why I would be concerned about these terms, is let's just say that you absolutely love jazz music. And then someone tells you that there's a jazz concert a jazz concert at a club. And you pay money to go to the jazz concert. And you show up. And then all of a sudden they start playing punk rock music. And let's just say you don't like punk rock music at all. It said jazz music. You came for the jazz music, but now they're playing punk rock. There's nothing wrong with punk rock music. There's nothing wrong with jazz music. But jazz music just isn't punk rock, and punk rock isn't jazz. So it's helpful for all of us, everybody, if we can just keep our terminology somewhat consistent and straight. Unfortunately, in yoga, this often doesn't happen because often teachers teach styles that they haven't really been fully trained in. And when they don't have a clear conception of what is yin yoga, what is restorative yoga, they have a tendency to mix and match and blur the lines. They're just not clear themselves. Once again, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to put anybody down. But these are things that I've seen. I've taught yoga a long time, and I've seen this happen with teachers and in studios. So again, my own feeling is it's much better if you want to teach something, get some clarity on it. If you're not going to get trained, at least study somewhat about that. So we want to make sure we're doing yin and not restorative yoga. If we use too many props, we start doing restorative yoga, or we use the props in the wrong way. I should probably put it that way. All right, let's go ahead and come on up. And now we'll take our legs straight. We take them straight and then fold forward, the same intention of just gently stretching, opening up the backside of our body. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the four sides of our torso need to be addressed somewhat differently. Now, these are generalizations, so you might find in your personal practice what I'm saying does not apply 100%, or it may even not apply at all. But I will say that what I'm saying applies to most of the people most of the time. That's why I'm saying it. Again, I've seen a lot of different things. I've seen exceptions to all kinds of generalizations and rules. I don't talk about them as much because, again, they're rare. And so when I address a drop-in class like this one with a bunch of different people in it, I'm going to try and hit what makes the most sense, what is going to be the experience for most people. So, in a forward fold like you're in now, generally speaking, we don't want to aggressively pull ourselves down for 5 minutes. Probably 30 seconds is okay, like in a vinyasa class. 30 seconds in a vinyasa class feels like a very, very long time. Maybe even a minute is okay. And again, there might be exceptions where pulling yourself into a pose for an extended period of time can be okay. But from what I've seen and learned, in a forward fold, it's not the best idea. A lot of people have damage in their backs, and a forward fold like that can really aggravate that damage. So gentle, and maybe even with support if necessary, okay? In a side bend, which we did at the beginning and which we will do again, it's very often okay to be quite aggressive. And part of the reason for this is most of us have quite a bit of tension in these muscles in our sides, quite a bit of tension here. And so we can be quite aggressive in stretching those muscles, and it's not going to hurt our spine. Our spine is a column of joints. We have, I think it's like 76 joints in our spine. We have 33 bones, and in each bone, we tend to have 3 joints. We have 2 facets, which come out to the sides, and then we have 1 spinous process that goes right down the middle, and each of those generally has a joint associated with it. So you have just a ton of joints there in your back. And if you've ever had a joint problem anywhere in your body, maybe you've had a shoulder problem or a hip problem or a wrist problem or an elbow problem or a knee problem or an ankle problem. If your joints hurt, it can be a real issue, right? It can be a showstopper. So you might have enough trouble just trying to keep your knee healthy. Imagine trying to keep all these different joints healthy. So when we are addressing the spine, again, we need to approach each direction somewhat uniquely. Now, of course, the sides are mirrored, right? So left and right sides, we're more or less going to approach them in the same way. And again, we can be quite aggressive, as we'll see with our lateral dragonfly, which is coming up in a little bit. But in a forward fold, these muscles tend to be very well stretched. We don't tend to have a lot of tension in the muscles in our back. So aggressively pulling ourselves down into that pose, the spine is likely taking most of that stress. And the way our bodies are designed, our joints really shouldn't take stress like that. The muscles around the joints should take the stress, and they help protect the joints in that way by engaging. So this is why very often when we come into a forward fold, if you take my classes and many other teachers' classes, you're going to hear to come into it with a straight spine. And the reason that they're saying that is because when your spine is straight, the muscles in your back are engaged. They are protecting your spine. All right? Okay, let's go ahead and switch sides. Oh no, sorry, that was the last of it. So we'll come on back down on our back and we'll take a rebound for a moment, okay? Okay, so let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, shake it out a bit. And then we'll hinge up to seated once again as you're ready. All right, as promised, we're going to take a look at half dragonfly now. To do half dragonfly, turn to face the side, long side of your mat, as I am doing now. One way to use the props that I didn't mention earlier is to sit on the props, which tends to push you forward more aggressively. This is kind of the opposite of what I mentioned in that first forward fold, where we're using props to support us. So if I have trouble folding forward in a relaxed manner, then sitting on something can help gravity do its job and pull me forward more aggressively, okay? This, for me, is a little much. So if I were to sit on something, I would probably sit on a folded blanket. Okay, once we're here with the legs straight, we're going to fold over. I'm not mirroring you, by the way, so you're going to have to go the other way. But left leg, make sure you know your left leg. We're going to fold over the left leg and just hold the foot. Now, you might feel like I'm starting to contradict myself because I'm saying hold your foot. But holding your foot is not pulling yourself down. All right, there is a difference. I'm asking you to hold yourself in place. You can do that by holding the foot directly. You can also use a strap, okay? So you're holding yourself there, and what you'd like to see, if you feel, is a stretch in your right waist here. Again, waist ribs. This is the second time that we are stretching the obliques and the intercostals, okay? So that's the name of these muscles that we're targeting. So if I do this and I feel that, then I'm done. I can just stay right there. If I don't, then I grab the foot like so and then roll my right shoulder back over my left. And again, right in here is where I want to feel that opening and stretch. You may also feel a stretch here. There's no extra charge for that. So don't worry about that. If you feel it, it's good for you to stretch that part of your body. Those are called your adductors. Again, the Taoists and the yogis over thousands of years have mapped out different parts of the body and the energy that runs through different parts of the body. And for them, this here, for the Taoists, is called the liver channel. This is called gallbladder channel. And these are in a sort of yin-yang relationship to one another. This is our Mahapatha Yoga logo, and this is based, it's kind of a play on the yin-yang symbol, right? Which is sort of that symbol, it looks like two fish or two tadpoles. One is white, one is black, and they're sort of swimming into one another. The white tadpole has a black eye, and the black tadpole has a white eye. Interestingly, that symbol represents that within each opposite lies its opposite. So in the heart of every woman, you might say, is a man. In the heart of every man is a woman. You can't understand something in which you do not take part. So the beauty of that yin-yang symbol is it shows that within the very heart, when you have the biggest black part of the tadpole, right in the middle of that is a white dot. In the big part of the white tadpole, right in the middle of that is a black dot. And this is just a way of expressing the reality of our experience as human beings. The Taoists say that when you go far enough to the yin side, eventually yin yields to yang. It yields to its opposite. It becomes its opposite. And the same is true in the other direction. If you go yang, 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 that's going to yield to the yin. And you can think of this as, imagine if you ran around like a maniac all day. At a certain point, you are going to need to rest, and rest is yin. Running around is yang. The opposite also tends to be true. If we are in bed all day, if we're laying around, if we're not active, we aren't doing anything, at a certain point we're likely to start to feel antsy, feel like we need to move or something if we're going to stay healthy. Okay? So again, these things are observations. That's what's interesting about these theories, is it's very much like science. The Taoists and the yogis observed nature. They observed animal, plant, and the cosmos, the life in the cosmos. They also observed human beings and their own emotions and experience. And over thousands of years, they may not have had the scientific method, so they may not have ever had like they definitely didn't have a double-blind study where they were studying 1,000 participants over so many years, but they just observed and shared. So one teacher might observe something about human nature, about the cosmos, about the seasons, pass that to his understudy, his student, who then took that knowledge and then maybe expanded on it and added to it. And so over thousands of years, with many hundreds of people observing the nature of reality and sharing that with one another, they developed these theories. And these theories, despite, again, the sort of Western tendency to write off anything that hasn't been scientifically verified as simply superstition, these theories are proving to be extremely robust, meaning that they actually hold up to scientific study. They are very often proven effective, and people still today are using them to heal themselves and to stay healthy and happy. Okay, let's switch sides. This is half dragonfly. Again, we are targeting now the muscles here on the left side of our obliques. Okay, the obliques and the intercostal muscles. These muscles, again, in the obliques, we are stretching them. And if we want to stay healthy and happy throughout our life, these muscles need to stay both flexible and strong. What tends to happen as we age, and again, as we lose that life force that while we're young, and I don't know if this was your experience, but it was certainly mine. When I was younger, I just run around, drink as much beer as I want, party, do whatever. And it was just like I get up the next day and there wasn't really any consequence to that. At this point, just to keep myself relatively free of pain, I often have to do quite a lot of body work. I saw my chiropractor earlier today. She worked on my neck. Otherwise, every few weeks or so, my neck tends to start getting more and more stiff and immobile. My left hip has been bothering me. I've been working on that myself, doing therapy here at home, but I've still not completely healed my hip. Earlier in the year, my back was in pain from a move that I had done the previous year. It hadn't completely healed. I think I may have finally completely healed my back, but it's taken effort. So again, these are things that I didn't deal with when I was in my 20s. If I hurt myself, I just seemed to heal out of nowhere. Most people will experience what I'm experiencing, which is as we get a little older, the body just doesn't bounce back. Now, I actually don't think this is a bad thing. I know many people who complain about this and they say, oh, Doug, your class is hard, or my hip hurts. Can't you do something that's for somebody my age? When I started teaching, I was in my 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. And I remember people saying to me, I'm in my 40s. I can't do this kind of stuff anymore, or whatever it is. Well, now I'm in my late 40s and I'm doing all the same stuff I was in my 30s. So I don't really buy it. In fact, I think this is a great way to grow old prematurely. So more and more research is coming out, again, this is scientific research, that says in order to grow young, in order to stay young, we must actively stress our physical system. We must take it to what's called an edge. We must take it to where it is being challenged and work there safely and competently. And this will actually stimulate the body to bounce back, if you will, stronger than before. As I mentioned earlier, very often as we age, we begin to feel things. We begin to feel our joints. We don't feel our joints when we're 8 or 13 years old. At least most people don't, right? I never thought about my joints in my teens, 20s, even in my 30s. I didn't think about my joints. Now I think about them all the time. Why? Because I feel them. I feel my neck. I feel my hip. I feel my back. So, in order for us to maintain our health, again, we generally need to ramp it up as we get older. Ignoring our physical health, not exercising, not eating right, isn't going to help us. Many people think that modern science somehow has solved this problem, and that if you go to get surgery or you get the right drug, you don't need to take care of yourself. You can just go to the doctor and she's going to prescribe something and you're good to go. I can tell you, as someone who is dating a surgeon, that that is absolutely not the case. In fact, my girlfriend complains to me all the time about the fact that people come to her thinking that she can fix a lifetime of negligence, that they have not been taking care of their body, and they think that they can just go and get one surgery and everything is going to be back to normal. Well, you will never be the same after surgery, and you will never be as healthy as you were before the surgery. Sometimes it's necessary. If you really let something get bad, you may need a very severe intervention, and that's exactly what surgery is. But if you're smart, you try and maintain the parts that you have instead of trying to replace them or fix them with something like surgery. Let's unwind back onto our back, and again, we'll take a moment just to relax in stillness. Okay, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, and we're going to shake it off again with a little bit of movement. And then, as before, hinge on up to seated, and I'll show you this next posture. Now, this next pose is meant to be done with props. So if you do not have blocks or anything that could substitute for blocks, you will be doing this posture, which is called Sphinx or Seal pose. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail about Sphinx or Seal today because, again, that isn't really the focus of our practice. This is if you do not have props. Once again, I recommend you get them. They're so useful to have at home, and when you want to, when you're ready to go back to yoga in the studios, once again, right now, many yoga studios do not have props because it's just not safe. So I see that probably for the foreseeable future. So you will want your own props, okay? All right, getting that out of the way, our next posture is supported fish. This block can be in one of many positions, like this. You could have it like that. You could have it this way or that way. This probably won't work, okay? But any of the other positions I showed you will probably work. We lay back on this block and then place this block behind our head. Now, the most important thing today is we want the arms out. I recommend a Y position. So this is T, straight out to the side, and then we bring them up for what we call a Y position. Now my shoulders are dropping, and what this is creating is a stretch here on the front of my chest. Hopefully you can see how sort of puffed up and open my chest is. If it feels okay on my neck, I can get rid of this block and then stretch the front of my neck where the thyroid is. And there are some glands and nerves here that can be stretched by having the head in that position, which you're welcome to do. Okay, so this is called supported fish. And again, we are trying to open up the front of the chest here. What's interesting about our physical body is, again, scientific research is starting to tell us that body position actually affects things like mood. It also affects how others perceive us. So in some of the research that's been done, it's been shown that if I were to hold my body like this, you may not be able to see me, but if you are watching, I've rolled my shoulders forward and I've sort of slouched. If I hold my body like this, as opposed to this, this will affect not just my mood and energy level, but it also affects how others will perceive me, okay? So when I roll my shoulders back and I sit nice and tall, I have more energy, I have a better mood, and other people are going to perceive me as more authoritative, as someone to actually listen to, pay attention to. All right? So what's interesting about that is most of us tend to sit in a way that encourages this kind of posture. This is quite normal for us in our culture, right? If I were to sit here and talk to you like this, you wouldn't think twice about it. You would think, okay, it's just a guy sitting there talking to me. But again, notice how different it looks. And you can try it for yourself. Notice how different it feels to sit in these different positions. Now, sitting upright like this can be challenging. And one of the reasons it's challenging is because the muscles in our back are weak. So again, today we're stretching these muscles in the torso, but that's half the picture. Most of you were not in the vinyasa class that I taught before this one. And I could say shame on you, because really for health, we need to both strengthen, which is yang, and stretch, which is yin. Okay? So we really want both. And in my classes, one of the things we emphasize in the yang class is strengthening these muscles. Very important for health. Again, from my perspective, it's not really optional. Okay, if we want to stay healthy, if we want to stay vital as we age, we need our spine to stay healthy. One of the ways we keep our spine healthy is by protecting it. How do we protect the spine? We protect it by keeping the muscles that are meant to protect it strong. We also keep the spine itself strong by exercising it. That's the yin part. But the protection part comes from the yang, from the vinyasa, from doing the stuff that's hard to do, where our muscles feel tired. Okay? Now again, you might be thinking, well, I never did that when I was in my 20s or 30s. Why do I need it now? Well, the reason you might need it now, once again, is starting to feel those joints hurting, starting to feel more tired more easily, starting to feel old. The irony of getting old is when most people start to feel old, quote unquote, whatever that is, whether it's joint pain, whether it's I just feel tired or lazy, whatever it is, when you feel old, you usually want to start taking it easy. The irony is that is the worst thing that you should do. That is going to make you old. If you resist that urge and you actually force yourself, perhaps, to do things that you don't necessarily want to do in the short term, like work out, do a vinyasa class, do yin yoga, go on a hike. Hiking, I'm a very huge fan of how hiking can actually be used as therapy to help keep us healthy mentally, emotionally, energetically, and physically. It's very, very good for you. But whatever it is, if you can force yourself to do those things, you will feel younger. You will feel more vital. You will stay more vital. You will feel more alive. All right? If we give in to this idea, oh, I'm getting old, oh, I can't do that vinyasa class anymore, I need to start taking it easy, well, then that's going to be our experience. And we are actually going to accelerate that trend. And so we're going to do even less. As we do less, we get weaker, we get frailer, we get more afraid, so we do even less. Now, there are exceptions to this. And again, the exception is sometimes people who have been black knights throughout their life. People who have been black knights for a long time, as they get older, they might find they have a lot of damage in their body from being a black knight, and that they need to start to cool it a little bit, or else they actually just completely ruin parts of their body. But very often, it's not people who are drawn to taking yin yoga and do yin yoga on a regular basis who are the black knights. They're very often what we affectionately call panda bears. And they very often need to be encouraged to push a little more. All right, let's go ahead and unwind. We have one more pose. Now again, if you do not have the props for this pose, you can repeat Sphinx or Seal, which I showed you earlier. You can also do saddle pose, which is done in this way. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about it. This is not what today's class is about, but if you do not have props, then you can do this pose. You can do the Sphinx or Seal pose, okay? Otherwise, we're going to do a supported bridge. You grab a block, come onto your back, lift your hips, and take the block and place it under your pelvis. All right, resting the pelvis on the block. Again, you have 3 heights for the block. Choose the one that makes sense for you. And then once you're there, extend your arms overhead and extend your legs out. Try and let your pelvis and your rib cage be drawn away from one another. And so we're really stretching here. This is called your rectus abdominis here. And it extends from your pubic bone up through your ribs. So right about there. All right, and we're trying to pull them apart to lengthen and stretch this area. Now again, if all of you were doing what I would see as a relatively well-rounded practice, then you would be doing some vinyasa yoga and working these muscles and strengthening them. And then today we would be stretching them back out, which is exactly what we want, that yin and yang balance, yin and yang, yin and yang. Now, in today's life, we live generally very imbalanced. And I'll try and explain what I mean by that. Modern life is generally characterized by a lot of mental stress. I read recently that we see more information in one day. We have to make more decisions in one day than our ancestors had to make in their entire life. Okay, can you imagine? So when you wake up and you log on to the internet and you drive to work or whatever it is that you do during your day, you're just constantly being bombarded with information and choices that you need to make. Our ancestors did not have to do that. Their lives were simple. I'm not going to say they were easy. They had much more physical activity that they needed to do. But mentally, it was way easier. There were many less decisions to be made. Many of us think that we like choice, right? People think, I love having choices. I love having options. I love going someplace with all different beers on the menu, and I love going places with a big menu with lots of options. Well, actually, again, science is teaching us that this isn't really the case, that it's stressful having choices. And the more choices that we need to make, the more it drains us of a certain kind of mental energy. So this is often why in the morning we are freshest and we are able to do our best mental work. By the time we get to midday or late in the day, oftentimes we are much less clear and much less able to make good decisions. So modern life, we are overworked up here. This is overheated, overused, way too active. And then this thing that's dangling down underneath our head, our body, is underused. We generally use it as like a prop to prop our head up on. And it's just sitting there dangling below us in a chair. Well, if you have been watching some of the recent posts on my Patreon page, I've posted a few TED Talks about the ills of sitting. So there's one more that's going to come next week. I highly recommend that you check those out because sitting is no joke. It's not your friend, especially sitting in a chair. Sitting on the ground, as I'm doing here, is much better for your health. You might think that because I'm sitting here teaching you that this is just a little area that I teach in and that the rest of my house has furniture and couches and chairs like everybody else. It does not. I learned a long time ago about the ills of sitting in a chair, and I basically got rid of all of my chairs. There's a chair that is at my desk, and I do have to sit at my desk. There's certain types of work that I can only do seated when I'm working on certain kinds of music and certain other computer tasks. But other than that, I'm basically sitting on the floor like now, or I might be laying on bed, or I might be in that Sphinx position with my laptop at my fingers. So sitting is not good for us, but most of us are forced to do it throughout the day. Now there are exceptions. Deborah, who's here today, she is a nurse. So as a nurse, you're going to spend a lot of time on your feet. You're going to walk a lot, move a lot. Now that is both good and bad, because once you have to do something for work, what tends to characterize work is too much of the same thing. Have you ever wondered when you're at work, you're doing something, and then you get tired and you want to stop doing it, but you know you can't, right? Have you ever been frustrated? You like had another cup of coffee, or you try to drink an energy drink to pump yourself back up? Have you ever been like, well, why can't I just feel energized all the time? That is your body's natural way of telling you, hey, give it a rest. Sit down for a minute. We're tired. You're actually starting to damage us by continuing to do whatever it is that you do. Well, just knowing Deborah and the type of work she does, as well as my girlfriend, again, the surgeon, in medicine, they don't care. If you are working in that profession, you're going to stay on your feet way longer than is healthy for you. So, again, there's several things that Deborah could do specifically to try and restore her body. But once she's done that, again, she will benefit as much as anyone else from moving in different ways than she does while she's at work, which is just basically standing and maybe walking on usually flat surfaces. So once again, hiking, walking on an incline, walking on uneven ground, even though it's still walking or standing, it is different than we are going to experience, say, in the hospital. All right, let's unwind, come back onto our back. Go ahead and relax. Feel the rebound. All right, bring your legs in, give them a little squeeze, and shake it out with a little bit of movement. And then I'm going to leave you to rest for about 6 minutes on your own in Shavasana. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. We were kind of all over the map today, which is fun sometimes to have a discussion like that. Let me know if there are any questions that came up as a result of something I talked about today. And as I've been mentioning recently, the weather's been perfect, and I've been taking groups of yogis out on walks and hikes. So if that sounds, hikes, and then we do some yoga, some chanting. Sometimes we get something to eat after that. So it's very candid, loose, it's donation based. If it sounds like something you want to do, let me know. Give me your phone number and your first and last name, and I will put you on my list, and you'll text from me the next time I'm organizing one. In fact, I'm thinking of doing one tomorrow or on Friday. So if that sounds appealing, let me know. I'll send you more information if I decide to do that. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. If you can, make vinyasa at 4:45. I understand why, again, that may not be very appealing. It's a much more physically challenging practice, but it is important. And if you can't make my vinyasa class, or if you find it's maybe a little bit above your pay grade, try and find a vinyasa class where a few things are present. The upper body is worked. It's not all lunges. It's not all leg work. Okay? You're working your upper body. And you may have a very weak upper body. That's okay. You want to work it. The other thing is you're working your core. The other thing I'd look for is balance that you're doing some standing balance. Those are really the main things that I would want you to get from a vinyasa class. From what I've seen, many vinyasa classes cater to what people are already good at. And they don't emphasize the things that we sort of need to balance, again, balance out what we're not getting during our day. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I hope to see you very, very soon. Thanks, Deborah. Thank you, Georgia. And we'll see you next time. Namaste.